When I was a kid, I was inundated by the myth of common sense politics. It was most prevalent in comedy, right? Saturday Night Live, The Tonight Show, Mad Magazine, Dave Barry columns. But the idea that there was this common sense middle ground that the politicians couldn't land on was just ubiquitous. You'd find it in comedy, but you'd also find it in like everyday conversations and even in the news media. Right, when Tom Brokaw or Dan Rather would break neutral character long enough to do opinion stuff, they'd adopt this common sense air and pretend that they weren't expressing their opinions or just one side of the political aisle here. They were expressing everybody's opinion. They were just expressing common sense. And as a kid, this seemed like a problem with a super obvious solution, right? We just fire all the politicians and replace them with regular Joes. And as childishly naive as this is, it actually stuck. It was and is an espoused political viewpoint all over this stupid-ass fucking country. I think you can make a strong argument that the lingering illusion of common sense politics is what got Trump elected the first time around. Well, I mean, sexism mostly, but also that. Because, of course, common sense politics never existed. It was an illusion created by privilege. The people writing, producing, greenlighting, and presenting these nuggets of common sense were upper income, white, cisgendered, straight, Christian men. The people they were consulting with and conversing with and comparing themselves to, they were all in that same demographic as well. So what seemed like common sense was just the insular beliefs of 75% of their 25% of the country. But that, it seemed like an overwhelming majority opinion because it was 3 out of every 4 people you meet. And sure, the people buying into this illusion did have to encounter contrary opinions from large groups of people here and there in their everyday life, but those people were minorities, right? And they already had kind of prepackaged ways of dismissing those people's opinions. And after all, when you deprive somebody of equal education long enough, you get to withhold equal opportunity to succeed. Yes, obviously, but you also get to dismiss them as uneducated as a bonus. Now, eventually, I woke up to that. Right. Or I guess that's taking too much agency there for myself. Eventually, I was woken up to that. I was forced to reckon with the fact that my early beliefs were shaped by an environment that, despite looking an awful lot like all the shit that I saw on the TV shows, right, was not the universal experience. And what seemed like common sense to me, ideas like everybody should have to take the same test the same way. No group should be more protected than another. And if we just ignored race, racism would go away. Those were, in fact, naive bullshit. Because a kid with a motor disability should have longer to take the fucking test. And groups like cishet white Christian guy don't need protection. And even if we could somehow ignore race, the centuries of historical oppression would still disadvantage everybody who isn't white. But unfortunately, as the American electorate is so desperate to remind us, not everybody woke up to that shit. Right, a lot of people have the same bullshit notion of common sense politics that Ronald Reagan sold them in the 80s, and they don't see no damn reason to update it. And I was reminded of that last night when I saw one of these dumbass copy and paste outrage lists that my brother-in-law shared on Facebook. Now, I've long since cleansed my Facebook feed of Trump-supporting fascists, but my wife still has a profile she maintains for family shit, so she sees this crap constantly. And mostly she lets me ignore it, but this one was too fucking dumb for her to keep to herself. So she showed it to me. And it's just this list of conservative talking points preceded by a self-aggrandizing sense of burden. Right? There's the fucking woe is me monologue about, oh, you just can't believe it's fallen upon him to remind everybody of all these common sense points that the body politic seems to have forgotten. And the various bullet points that follow range from nonsense that nobody is advocating for, as in we shouldn't open our borders to rapists and drug dealers, to gross and intentional misstatements of reality, as in men shouldn't be allowed to compete in women's sports, to just made up bullshit, as in schools shouldn't have litter boxes for kids who identify as cats. There were some fucking 25 points on the bullshit list, and not a single fucking one of them could be honestly correlated with anything that's happening in the universe or that any significant portion of people are advocating for. And when they do vaguely intersect with real policies and real goals, they've been translated into some fact-averse bigot speak that distorts them to the point of caricature. But because he's been sold this myth of the elusive common sense politics, he can convince himself that his opinions aren't competing in an arena against other opinions, generally more informed than his own. No, his ideas are competing against the perpetual lack of common sense that's been plaguing our nation since, enter whatever mythical era they think America was great again in. Now, you divorce this guy of that illusion, and suddenly he's got to look at this list and say, well, this is fucking nonsense. It can't possibly be that these are the policies that 50% of the country are fighting for. Perhaps I should go ask my brother-in-law, who I know to advocate liberal political policies for a fucking living, and ask him if these actually accurately represent the other side of the argument that I'm having. Right? Because if we start from the place of, let's assume that we're all dealing with the same amount of common sense, you can't land on, and that side wants kids to shit in kitty litter boxes. But of course, clinging to this common sense illusion isn't just a mistake born of bad judgment and insufficient reflection. It's a defense mechanism. Because if you accept that people actually do have common sense, you have to entertain the idea that you could be wrong. And that's a tough thing to do no matter what, right? Like even for skeptics who pride themselves on changing their mind, it's a tough thing to do. But now think about how much harder it has to be to admit you're wrong when you look at the country burning down around you and you realize that if you're wrong, your wrongness was the match.